Okay, it is 6:30, so I will call to order a meeting of the Oregon School District Board of Education. It is Monday, July 10th, 2023. We are at the OSD Innovation Center at Oregon High School. Katie, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Bijak? Here. Dr. Bush?
Here.
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Dr. Lakuta?
Here.
Mr. Pankratz?
Present.
Ms. Wright?
Here.
Ms. Flanagan?
Present board does have a quorum, and I do have from Ms. Heitz that this meeting has been properly noticed, so we are good there. We do have on the agenda tonight 3 action items, and I did also want to note that the board will go into closed session at the conclusion of this meeting and will not return to open session. So, given that, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda. All right. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We do have an agenda. Next is a consent calendar, and I will read the following donations. We have $354.99 from the Oregon Choral Boosters for the choral music for the FES 4th grade choir. We have $96 from 8 FES 6th grade families for a scholarship donation toward FES 6th grade Urban Air final field trip. And then $100 for the A-Team scholarship from Brittany Spencer Grant. And then I do know that we have, do we have minutes? Yeah, we have minutes approval, and I know we do have some abstentions from that, correct? And so you can note that when you when she does the roll call. So I will entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Katie, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Dr. Bush?
Yes.
Dr. Lakuta?
Yes, with an abstention from the minutes of the previous meeting.
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes, motion carries 7-0. Okay, moving on to B, information items. Is there anyone here for public comment? Anyone here for public comment? No one's registered, correct? Okay, one more time. Anyone here for public comment? Okay, moving on to 2 OEA report. Is there anyone here from the OEA? Okay, seeing none. And then students. Students are off for the summer, so we do not have a student report. So moving right along to C, action items. The first is the 2023-2024 academic standards, which is a annual approval action item. So I will turn that over to Dr. Bergstrom.
And Mr. Tanner is going to be here tonight to explain to us the academic standards that will be utilized in the next school year.
Hello. This is a fairly routine process that DPI requires us to do at the first board meeting of every July. So there is a purple sheet for you that you can read the applicable information. The short of it is that the state requires us to, the board to adopt academic standards in some specific areas, which are mathematics, science, reading and writing, geography, and history. And we also have to notify parents and guardians of the standards, which we have done by putting them on our website. We have a slightly easier way to access them now. We made a shortcut on the website, so it's just www.oregonsd.org/curriculum, where you can view the academic standards. So that is basically it, but I'd welcome any questions.
All right, does anyone have any questions for Mr. Tanner? All right, seeing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the academic standards for the next school year.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second? All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion or questions for Mr. Tanner? Go ahead, Heather.
Can you just share a little bit about if any of the academic standards changed from the year prior?
The academic standards have not changed substantially. There were some shifts in the math standards that happened, but they weren't a big overhaul from DPI. So we've been implementing them over the past year. The shifts are related to equitable practices and math identity. So they're not so much in the academic realm as they are in the development of learning, like learning mindsets for mathematics. We also, the social studies standards actually were adopted 3 years ago, but we revised our implementation of them this last year, but that actually came to you separately earlier. So that's the only thing really that's changed since the last time I came to present these here.
Great, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, hearing none. Katie, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Dr. Lakuda?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Dr. Bush?
Yes.
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes, motion carries 7-0. Thank you, John. All right, moving on to 2023-2024 food service prices. So I will turn that over to Dr. Bergstrom, who I think will pass it off to Andy and Sarah.
Exactly. So off to Andy and Sarah.
This is, again, one of those things that we do every year about this time, and I'm going to have Sarah kind of walk us through the proposal.
All right, well, thank you for having us. So to start, I kind of want to give you some of the statistics from the past school year to just round out why we're looking for some increases. So we served 300,953 lunches, 37,175 breakfasts. We had 335 staff professional development hours, and collectively our staff have 210 years of experience, which I think is incredible. We traveled to 9 different countries with our Around the World Day menus, and we partnered with 5 local farms this year to provide apples, beef, and a variety of local veggies. And finally, we renovated the Netherwood kitchen serving line. So it was quite an adventurous year in the food service department. So we are looking to increase our meal prices for next school year to offset some of the challenges that we've still been experiencing due to meal price or food increases across the board, as well as looking at some of the pandemic era funding is disappearing. So we also in the last year increased our staff wages, which were well deserved for our team. So we are hoping for a 15-cent breakfast and lunch increase, which would only affect the paid students as the reduced price is federally mandated. I think that's all I have.
All right, we will open it up for clarifying questions for Sarah. Does anyone have any questions? Or Andy? Go ahead, Heather.
You said some big number, 309. I didn't write the rest of it down, which is amazing. Do you have a comp to what that was the year prior, understanding that that was during the COVID time where it was free? But yeah, I'd just be curious about how that compares.
Yeah, we actually stayed fairly similar percentage-wise of how many students that we served. So it would have been very, very minimal change. Yes. Our breakfast number did go down. Free breakfast was incredible for our students, and we pushed it quite heavily. We are only at about 15 to 16% free and reduced rate, and not a lot of families were as willing to pay for breakfast as they were when it was, free.
I have one more. Let's see one more. And my other question is not that we're necessarily right. If kids are in our school district, they're eating lunch here. But do you have a sense of what other area schools are charging for lunch and how that compares to what you're proposing?
So we participate in the WeSNIP buying group, and we have the data from all of the school districts. Unfortunately, it's not necessarily just Dane County that we look at. We are one of the lower free and reduced rates in the buying group, and therefore our pricing is ever so slightly higher, but it's still pretty comparable to what people in our group are using.
One more and then I'll be done.
Go ahead.
Do you have a sense of, supply and demand? So if, obviously we want as many meals to go through as possible, do you have any sense of historically when we've raised, I think last year was 10 cents, if I'm remembering correctly, what that does, or if any, or if it doesn't affect how many meals we're serving?
So this upcoming year is my 5th school year here, and most of that was pandemic era. So I'm not quite sure. This transition from everything being free to having the paid structure again really didn't affect our lunch. So I'm hoping that this increase will be an understanding from families. As you can see in the grocery stores, how much food has gone up.
Mm-hmm. Related to that, if I could just jump in, Andy, as you talk about, I guess this is a 2-part question. One is, of the 300,000 lunches that we serve, Sarah, what percentage of those are families or students that are paying full freight for lunch, and what percentage, I know 15% of our student body is free and reduced, but what percentage of the people that actually eat the lunch What's the breakdown there? Do you know?
So off the top of my head, I'm not 100% sure of
Okay.
the numbers specifically. We're at, for breakfast, more of the students who participate are free and reduced kids. For lunch, it's something like 80% of our free and reduced kids eat. So whatever number that makes it from there. I could pull it and send it
Yeah.
to you guys. I just off the top of my head don't
So
know.
then, to see if I'm understanding this correctly, Andy, so if we set a 15% increase and we have 80% of families on free and reduced, we bill back the federal government for that total cost, or is it reduced cost in terms of what we get?
So the dollar amount for the free and reduced
Yeah.
lunch program is set by the federal government.
Okay.
And the state has a little add-on as well.
Okay.
And just to kind of make sure we're all on the same page, 80% of kids aren't free and reduced in our district. It's more like 15,
Yeah, right.
16%. Yep.
Right.
And so, yeah, we don't really get to bill them anything. It's just based on the number of lunches we sell. We get reimbursed by that. I will say the federal reimbursement rate is higher currently than what we're proposing, right?
So what I'm trying to get at is, what is the cost, and what is the whole that we're, if we're trying to get closer to what it costs us, what we're billing, given who we're billing full freight for, what are we getting? So what is the budget we are not accomplishing here, even though we're increasing 15%? So what is the whole that we're going to be expecting? Given a 15% or 15-cent increase versus a 25?
Yeah, it's fairly significant because of the wage increases that we did this last year. We did build the food service staff into the referendum. So we are going to be transferring funds from the education fund into the food service fund to basically compensate for that. And it's fairly significant. It'll be a six-figure number.
Okay.
So the 15 cents will help us start to dig out of that. But we have a long ways to go. Either we need to increase participation significantly, or we're going to have to continue to raise prices.
Yeah, and so I guess that's, knowing that 80% of the students that eat lunch are free and reduced, so it's really not a big number in terms of who is paying out of their own pocket. Is that what I'm understanding?
Only 16% of our population is free and reduced.
I understand that, but that population is eating more of the lunches.
Correct.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but I think what you said, Sarah, was that for lunch purposes, it's actually there's a fair amount of people that are paying for lunch that are contributing.
Yeah, so I think I may have said it in a confusing way.
okay.
So 80% of our free and reduced kids are eating lunch,
got it.
and then the rest of the percentage is made up of our paid students. So it's probably
Correct.
Yeah, so what I'm trying to do is get, what is the breakdown of how many families are eating lunch, and what percentage of those families are free and reduced, and what percentage are not?
yes, I can pull the number.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
It's probably best to think of it as like 80, and 20, somewhere around in there. 80% of the lunches are going to students who are paying full price, and about 20% of them, or less than that actually, are going to students who are eligible for free and reduced lunch.
Okay, so I'm trying to understand how significant a 15-cent increase is in terms of dollars. That's what I'm trying to get at.
And it is fairly significant
Okay.
because the majority of our parents are paying.
Okay, that's what I was trying to get. Okay, other questions?
So I'm not a mathematician, but 80% of 15% would be like 12%, right? So 88% of lunches are paid. Yeah, that's what I was. So the 10 cent per milk carton increase, it said in the fourth paragraph, right, that the price of a single cart of milk has also gone up 10 cents. So the 10 cents we're asking for is just to cover that increase in cost, right?
Yes, and also that would only be if a student is purchasing it without a meal. So it's always included in a meal. So that would be essentially the a la carte price for a carton of milk.
Go ahead, Leslie.
So this is probably more an Andy question than a Sarah, to take you off the hot seat for a minute. So previously, last year and years previous, we talked about how food service was pretty self-sustaining. Now that's changed, obviously, because we gave raises, but because food has gone up, inflation has gone up, and things like that. We're only asking for a very minimal amount of what they have suggested that our prices go to. What is the thought process behind only suggesting that 15 cents? Why are we not asking for more so that we actually can get closer to breaking even on this?
Yeah, it kind of goes to Krista's question prior, is like it's a supply and demand component too. So if we price ourselves out of the market and we have more and more people bring lunch from home, then we're hurting ourselves there. It'd be better if we could sell more lunches because a lot of our costs are fixed. And so that's kind of the thinking. Usually in the past, we haven't gone over that 10-cent marker, but just because of all the things that are going on between the pandemic funding and the significant increase in food service prices, that's why we decided to just push it a little bit further than we have in the past.
And so with that, and you're looking at that, if we see that doesn't price us out of the market, then do we expect to try and get a little bit farther in the following year?
Absolutely. I mean, that would be if there was no hesitation. I mean, if there was no impact, right, to going to the 15 cents. Yeah, maybe next year we might look at 20 cents, that type of thing. I think it would depend a lot on the market conditions too, and what's going on with food inflations and those types of things. But we definitely would like to. We'd like to increase participation and also increase pricing. It's just a question of, can you pull off both of those?
Any other questions, Leslie?
Well, I was just going to say to Chris's point, I would love to see this like broken down in some sort of a chart that says, we're, serving this X number of kids at this amount and X number of kids at the full price amount, and see where we're making our, where we're balancing that, and seeing how big of an area we are needing to dig out of, because that's something that we could potentially, go out farther with it in years, to see where we need to be, is my thought.
Yeah, we are just, closing the books from a week and a half ago. So we definitely could put some things together for you on that.
Caleb, I think you had a question?
So this is my first year on the board. Is this does this adjustment happen annually? I mean, is this, so like every year there's an additional increase, I'm assuming?
Yeah, as long as I've been here, we might have had a couple years where we didn't have increases, but it's been far and few between.
Okay. Which I understand, because everything costs more and inflation is for real. The other question I guess the other concern, it's not really a question, but a concern that I had is that free and reduced lunches, reduced lunches is a certain percentage of the poverty rate for a family, right? Mm-hmm. And that it covers a certain amount of families. But I think, in terms of like the 15-cent increase, I do think we need to be cognizant of the fact, and I think that's what we were just talking about in terms of like, supply and demand and pricing families out, that there are a lot of families that are right on that bubble of qualifying for reduced lunches who don't. And I think it's important that we do try to make sure that we don't put those families in a position where, even though they don't qualify for reduced lunch, it's a substantial increase. So I think 15 cents is not a small amount of money, but I think it's also, for me anyway, I think we do need to be conscious of the fact that it's an increase, and I don't want to go to families and parents and ask them for too much, because reduced lunches only cover so many families that are also, there are other families out there who are probably struggling financially that don't qualify for reduced lunches.
Go ahead, Heather.
I think my math is correct when I say that we're basically looking at a 5% increase, right? Of the weighted average of our meal. So I think, to Caleb's point, I think that's reasonable. What concerns me is that if milk is with every meal and that's 10 cents, that's leaving us, they have to pay for milk, right?
Nope, that's built into the lunch price.
Okay. So it's that the 10 cents is already built
into that. So actually, of the 15 cents, 10 cents of it's going to milk.
That's exactly
point.
that's my point, is that is concerning to me, because pretty much every kid, unless you don't like milk, who gets a lunch is taking a milk carton, which is 10 cents, and has eaten 10 of the 15 cents. I totally understand what Caleb's saying. I'm not trying to say let's go hog wild here, but that is concerning, that 10% or 10 cents is already, 2/3 of the money that we're raising is already, we know it's gone. And when you think about if we're raising 5% on average, certainly food costs and labor, things like that are exceeding that 5%. So I don't have a magic solution. I'll leave that to you, Andy, but that, I just wanted to say that out loud.
Go ahead, Mary.
So yeah, I know we talked about how the fact that the salary increases as part of the referendum would obviously change the balance that we've been in for quite some time. But I'm hoping you can give us a sense of like what the overall, so the transfer funds from the general fund, is that roughly to cover salary, or is it exceeding, is it above and beyond salary, and is it covering, so that 10% or that 10 cents of the 15 cents it seems like it's really insufficient.
So the number from the referendum perspective is a six-figure number. It's over $100,000. How do I want to say this? There were other things that happened this year. We did, as Sarah said, we did have a capital project at Netherwood. So there is a fund balance. So I hesitate to say this because people will remember it. But the fund balance is, assets minus liability equals fund balance. Another way to look at it is it's the amount that's been left over from years past. It grew significantly this last year, like it tripled, partially because, so from like 200 to 600,000, partially because of all this one-time funding that was provided to us through the state and federal government this last year. We're going to eat into a good portion of that this year, both because of the cost increases as well, even with the $100,000 transfer coming from the education fund. So I'm trying to figure out how we land this in the next couple of years so that we still have a fund balance in food service, because that will be our challenge.
All right, yeah, thank you. I was trying to take Krista's angle and come at it from a slightly different angle, but yeah, I appreciated that. Thank you.
So I think what the board is trying to say is, not having the history that you and Sarah have, that we're trying to get to this place of going up to the line and not going over, right? And so if you're, in your expert opinion, you both think that line is 15 cents, that's what you're coming to the board with for this year.
Yeah, for this year, I can honestly see something larger. And like, if we do not get a price sensitivity where we lose participation this next year, we might have to bring something a little bit significantly larger to you next year. I think we are kind of testing the water a little bit to see how that impacts us. I will also say that the environment is constantly changing. Last week, I think Sarah sent me something on Friday saying that now this is for the entire country, $1.2 billion was just allocated from COVID funds to school districts. We will get, the state's portion of that was $20 million. We're going to get a percentage of that, again, in one-time funding that will help offset things this next year. So I wished I could, give you a spreadsheet and kind of project things out, but things are constantly kind of moving around a little bit on us.
Yeah, one-time funding is becoming a thing.
It is something that, I would have never anticipated in my career, the amount of funding, but for great causes, absolutely, and needed. It's just that where do we land at some point in time?
Well, I think the other thing that's a real benefit to this district is Sarah, right? You've done an amazing job in growing this food service program and the country visiting. I mean, that's a marketing plan for people to eat lunches at our school, and that's a huge piece of this, right? And so you're really to be commended for what an amazing job you're doing with you and your staff and these creative ideas. And I mean, my kid is eating 2 lunches a day. I mean, he's a 6'1", 17-year-old, but he never ate school lunch before, but he's attracted to it. And that's another big piece of this. And so having you is really important to us. So you're doing really good things in terms of trying to balance both of these things together to get us to a place that makes it really financially feasible as it can be with a moving target. Heather, I think you had one more.
I'm going to evoke Tim LeBrun here and get into some numbers because I hope he's watching. 309,000, he's certainly not watching. 309,000 meals, right? We just said 12% is on the free and reduced, so we think 88%, right? So 88% of those meals is 271,000 meals. If we're netting 5 cents after we already pay for our 10 cents of milk, we're at $13,596, which I know you already know this, but man, that's concerning to me that's, this 15% increase that's what we're netting. Now, granted, hopefully we can get more people to buy lunch, and you're doing amazing work, and I also love the farm connection, but that's not a good outlook of, a price increase, and that's what we're netting out of the whole year of kids eating lunch, so.
I will say, and I don't know this, so Sarah can correct me, but, milk prices fluctuate.
Right.
So things change in that regard. Are we at a high point? Are we at a low point? Federal government hopefully they only get a 1% increase this next year, but hopefully they'll pass on a little bit of revenue from us or to us from those programs. So there are a lot of different things kind of happening, but we will definitely understand the financials and we do have a hill to climb. But we also just need to be cognizant that we don't want a submarine participation because that's why we're here.
I actually think it's just an important point
Yep.
as we're talking about
Yep.
this increase that we are being mindful and that this is really what it's netting us, right? So that we aren't going full bore and going crazy, that we are being mindful, and that even with being mindful, it's still dire, maybe too strong of a word, but it's,
Go ahead, Leslie, you had a question?
So, this may not be an option for this area, but I know we've talked about in other areas trying to think out of the box and looking at ways to bring more money into the school. Is this one of those areas that we could maybe potentially look at finding some alternative sources of income, whether it be from food donations or something else along those lines that might help us a little bit with this?
I think we're always open to creative solutions, but this is probably one of those heavily federally regulated areas that we are a little limited to. And Sarah can talk to that more.
I hesitate with the word donation and food, or those words together, because it is very regulated of what we can accept. But we definitely have been looking at some creative solutions, and yes.
Okay, we're open to putting a motion on the floor.
I move to approve the 15 cent per breakfast increase. No, sorry. 15 cent per lunch per meal increase as laid out on the food service prices item.
All right, is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Go ahead, Troy.
Does that also include the 10 cent for lunch or for milk?
And the 10 cent per milk as an a la carte item.
Any further discussion? I will admit I share Heather's concern that it may not be enough. So I'm not sure where I'm going to go with this, but any further discussion?
I mean, I'll weigh in. Good questions by all the board members and responses by Sarah and Andy. And I just get the sense that we are walking this tightrope and balancing and going up to trying to get up to the point where we eat into the fund balance a little bit, but try to retain that going forward. And obviously a lot of uncertainty in the future. So, for me, I'm comfortable with the 15 cents this year and be monitoring it for next year. But I'm really sensitive to pricing our families out of school lunches. So
I guess what I would request is that we do some tracking, that when we come next year that we have the figures, that kind of what we've asked for, that we really have it nailed down in terms of who's buying, who it is, what those amounts are, what you're presenting in an increase and what that nets to us. I think we really would like to see that information next year, especially as we, try out this recommendation this year. I would like to see that next year. Okay, any other further discussion? Okay, Katie, could you please call the roll?
Dr. Lakuta?
Yes.
Dr. Bush?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes.
Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes, motion carries 7-0. Thank you, guys. Difficult topic, difficult times. All right, moving on to 2022-2023 budget adjustments. I will turn that over to Dr. Bergstrom.
And I, of course, am going to turn that over to Mr. Wyland. But before I do, I just want to underscore the fact that what we're asking for is not about additional spending authority. It is simply moving funds for accounting purposes. And now I'll hand it over to the person who can really explain it.
Yeah, this is again one of those annual things that we do, and I will freely admit that sometimes, and even in my mind, it doesn't always make the most sense, but we have lots of things like that are in statutes. But basically all we're trying to do is line up the amount of money that we're spending on a functional basis into where the money was actually spent. And as you can see, we're not talking about large sums of money. We were off by just a little bit in some functional areas, and we gave some reasons for why that happened. And we're just trying to do this so that essentially we don't get a footnote in our audit in December when we receive the audit. It's not a big deal. There are absolutely no penalties to it or anything like that. The idea is just to make sure that we had the money to cover where we spent more than we had planned. So as Dr. Bergstrom just said, this is not additional spending authority. It's just to kind of line up the money for where it was actually spent compared to where it was budgeted. Does that make sense?
Okay, any questions for Andy? All right, hearing none, I will entertain a motion. Can you turn your mic?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Go ahead, Leslie.
Andy, on the homeless transportation part that has gone up significantly, is that over time something you've seen that's consistently gone up for our students that don't have transportation to here, or is that something that fluctuates?
I would say it fluctuates, but this year was an anomaly. The ability of other districts to secure reliable transportation, people were doing things that they hadn't had to do in the past, and that significantly increased the cost. The labor force just wasn't there to kind of make this happen. Third-party companies kind of came in to try to answer the need, but the pricing structures of those third-party companies was fairly significant. And so I think everybody kind of learned. We didn't jump on that bandwagon, but we're still on the hook for half of all these costs. So when a district has a student that is coming to Oregon, or a student that lives in Oregon School District that's going to their district, we get half the cost of the bill. So we did have some conversations with some of our friends around here to say, hey, next time let's see if we can brainstorm something together. Could we hire an employee? I mean, that would have been cheaper in some of these situations than what actually happened. But again, we had situations where we were having a hard time finding people. So my hope is that as the labor market kind of cools off a little bit, these types of things we'll have a better handle on it together as a community of school districts.
Great, thank you. Any other questions, discussion? Okay, hearing none. Katie, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Garrison? Yes. Dr. Bush?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Dr. Lakuta?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes.
Ms. Wright? Ms. Flanagan?
Yes, motion carries 7-0. Thank you, Andy. Okay, moving on to D, discussion items, committee reports. Policy, Heather.
Policy met earlier this evening with no action item. We will be meeting again at the end of July or early August.
Great, thank you. B, vision steering. Anna.
Visioning has a meeting scheduled for, I believe, for next Wednesday, and that's all there is to report from Visioning.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to information items, visioning and strategic planning, teaching and learning update, and superintendent's report. Those are all Dr. Bergstrom.
Thank you. And tonight, the only thing I'm going to say regarding the visioning and strategic planning is since the last time that we had a board meeting together, our administrative team attended a 3-day workshop in Wisconsin Dells led by the Association for Wisconsin School Administrators. And it was a highly structured process for goal setting. And we kind of broke the mold, as we usually do, by sending every administrator in the district. They'd never had anybody do that before, but we did it and we benefited from it greatly. And I think it gave us an even more a tighter vision, I would say, for what we want to accomplish and what is manageable to bite off in chunks. And we'll be using 100-day goal cycles to monitor our effectiveness. And we'll be reporting more about this to you in the first board meeting in August. But I just wanted to mention that we have made some really fantastic progress related to annual goals and action plans for the district and for the schools, because that's what the process was all about. It was about creating coherence within your system. And part of that coherence is our alignment to the board's priorities that are from 2022 to 2025. So we are currently in the midst of all of our planning related to how we are going to take the board priorities and make them a reality for our students and our staff. And now for kind of the fun stuff. And you would think that our kids would take a break, but they continue to excel at just about everything they try. So here we have 2 OSD students performing at Carnegie Hall. So we have their middle school students, Milo on horn and Zach on percussion, who recently performed at Carnegie Hall, and their performance was a part of the Honors Performance Series. So in addition to the performance, Milo and Zach were able to work with master conductors, rehearse and interact with other students from around the globe, and attend a Broadway show. So congratulations to them. That's a really significant accomplishment for 2 middle school students. And then, talk about significant accomplishments. 2 years in a row, Oregon is the state mathematics team champions. They are the Wisconsin state champions, and they received the top score with 211 points, followed by Brookfield Academy, De Pere and Sturgeon Bay, and then Madison Memorial. So our students did it 2 years in a row. We're pretty proud of them. And I think there's an article in the Observer this week on their second state championship. We also have some national champions, and you can see from this picture, our student, Jonathan Krieger, is the one in the middle because he is the national champion in technical drafting at National Skills USA Conference in Atlanta earlier this summer. So look at that. That looks like an NBA game or something, doesn't it? Yes, I'm so impressed by all of the people who come out to support our students at the national championship, and congratulations to Jonathan. We also have 3 of our students, including one of our student reps for the school board, who are going to the Oregon going to Badger Boys and Girls State. So Esmond and Nate, 2 of our Oregon school board reps are going. So Nate is attending along with Esmond, and Peyton is attending Badger Girls State. So during these programs, students learn how the government system works by creating their own governments. And this is a program that's been around for a while. So I wonder if there are even people in the room who have been Badger Boy or Badger Girls State program representatives. Not myself, but definitely relatives of a similar age. So I'm excited for them because I know it's going to be a great opportunity. And we have some students here who are very interested in public policy. Summer semester started. This was a really, really fun beginning. It started on Thursday, so it was Thursday and Friday. Today was day 3. We have full breakfast, we have lunch, we have transportation, we have all kinds of high school students in neon green shirts leading students around the building. I think every administrator currently in the room was leading students around the building and just having a great time. And I am amazed by the confidence of our younger elementary school students. By day 2, they were walking around the high school like they owned the place, and it was a beautiful thing to see. Not only are they having a really fun experience and they're interacting with all kinds of kids from the different schools within the district, but they're also getting familiar with a place where we hope they'll go to high school and feeling like it is a safe, fun, and happy place. And then, congratulations to the students who engaged in the supervised agricultural experience as part of their study of agriculture. So it's, as it was explained to me when we went out to do the podcast at the Stoughton Fair on Friday, participation in ag classes is the core, surrounded by the FFA experience, surrounded by the supervised agricultural experience. And all 3 of those pieces are interconnected in the students' learning. Well, we went out there to learn a few things, and learn we did. And one of the things we learned is that our students are absolute rock stars at this. 2 of our students, Lydia and Tanner in the larger picture, qualified to compete at the Master Showman level, and they both finished in the top 5 with Tanner as the 2023 Stoughton Fair Master Showman. So they show one of their animals, and we saw goats, rabbits, chickens, different types of cattle, dairy, and others, and pigs all over. And so what they had to do, for instance, I'll just say Lydia, she was showing rabbits and chickens, and she won the rabbit category. And so to compete, she then had to show and talk in depth to a panel of judges about every animal in the fair. So she had to bring up a cow and a pig and a goat, even though she only raised rabbits and chickens. So they really learn a lot. And it was very fun to sit down with them and talk to them about this experience, have them show Miss Mundinger and I their animals, have us tell us about them, and to have them talk about what they take away from this experience. Not all of them are going into the agricultural field. As a matter of fact, very few of them were. But what they are taking away from the experience is how interconnected we are as in our ecosystem, and how everything you do, no matter what your profession, impacts the food supply, impacts animals. I was absolutely blown away by how they spoke about their experience. So it was a really fun thing. And congratulations to Tanner and Lydia and all of the students who showed. And then here we are at the podcast. Yes, that's me with the chicken. And it was really, really fun. And I went home and asked my husband if we could start raising rabbits, because that looked awesome. That was not a good idea, Leslie, but it sounded fun for a few moments. Really, really enjoyed that. So many thanks to Ms. Bede for inviting us out, and for all of the students for spending that time with us. And that concludes the report.
Super cool. All right, F, closing, moving on. Future agenda, our next meeting is July 24th, so 2 weeks from tonight. We will gather together again, so we'll get the agenda out to people, and let me know if you have things that you would like added to the agenda. And then moving on to checkup before we move into closed session. I will go around the room. Mary, anything? Heather? Troy? Leslie? Caleb?
I would just add that raising rabbits is not a good idea.
Underscore that one.
Yeah, my sister had a rabbit period growing up, and it was, yeah. And you reminded me, it was not Wisconsin, but I went to Illinois Boys State.
Did you?
I did. So I thought I would just throw that in there, since you said there might be somebody in the room.
I had a feeling.
It jarred that memory, so I did.
Great.
That's it.
Anna?
I went to Minnesota Girls State.
Getting a wee bit competitive here. Okay.
Neither as good as Wisconsin.
All right, we will convene in closed session in 5 minutes. Thanks, everybody.